Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical theme in Real Madrid's 4-0 win over Osasuna. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on Real Madrid's shape, then we'll focus on their midfield impact in the opening half, and then we'll shift to the subtle tweaks that Ancelotti made in the second half to help Real Madrid kill off the game. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, Real Madrid started the game in what looked to be a 4-3-3, with Valverde just a bit higher in that right-sided role. Vini Jr was hugging the touchline to provide the width, and then you had Bellingham and Modric just ahead of Camavinga. In terms of possession, which they dominated, their shape shifted as Osasuna dropped off into two banks of four. And what we often saw was that the fullbacks were pushing higher, but they were positioned in different roles. For instance, on the left-hand side, Vini Jr was often hugging the touchline, and Bellingham was in that pocket of space between the wide player and the central midfielder. And then Mendy was often positioned deeper in the half space. There were times where Bellingham did drop off deeper ahead of the midfield bank to form that midfield trio, and that's where you would see Mendy at times pushing forward into that space that Bellingham would occupy, as Vini Jr did hug the touchline. And in the opening half, there were rare occasions where Vini Jr was in that pocket of space between the fullback and the center back, and Mendy was pushing forward to provide the width down the left-hand side. In those situations, that's where you often saw Real Madrid attacking in six, and that would often see Bellingham pushing forward just behind Vini Jr, Valverde shifting narrow and dragging away the left back, and then Carvajal pushing forward to provide the width, dropping the left-sided attacking midfielder into a deeper position and forming a back five for that Osasuna defensive line. In most cases, Madrid were often always attacking with five. It was predominantly Carvajal and Vini Jr hugging the touchline to provide the width. You had the center forward occupying the center backs, and from there it was either Valverde and Modric in the pocket of space up from the right-hand side, and then Mendy or Bellingham from the left-hand side. Regardless, Bellingham was useful in those pockets of space to receive the ball. At times, he would move on the outside of Ruben Garcia, then look to push beyond him to receive the ball in pockets of space. But majority of Madrid's productivity stemmed down the right-hand side, where you witness Modric dropping off deeper into the right half space to receive the ball on the outside of the center backs. And that's where you would see Valverde tucking in narrow into that pocket of space between the wide left-sided player and Lucas Toro. And Carvajal was pushing forward to provide the width down the right touchline zone. When Carvajal would receive the ball, that's where you would see Valverde looking to make runs in behind the fullback to receive the ball. But there were times where Carvajal was occupying that space between the left-sided central midfielder and the left midfielder, and Valverde was hugging the touchline, and he was looking to pull away those markers to allow space for the ball to be pushed out towards Valverde in that zone. There was an example in particular where you had Modric just ahead of Osasuna's front two, and he was able to slide the ball across the midfield bank due to Carvajal's narrow positioning, and that witnessed Valverde receiving the ball free down the right touchline zone, beating his marker in towards the penalty area, and then sliding the ball through the 6-yard box that just evaded the striker. But what we often saw from Madrid here was that they were forming a box midfield with Modric and Camavinga in those deeper zones just ahead of the center back, and then Bellingham and Valverde would occupy the pockets of space between the central midfielders and the wide players. Ultimately, here you witnessed a 4v2 advantage for Madrid, as the center backs had time on the ball, and the Osasuna front two was often occupying Camavinga, and that's where Modric often shifted to the right of Tchouameni or dropped in between the center backs to get on the ball to exploit that 4v2. But when he dropped into that space to the right of Tchouameni, he had time to play positive passes due to the fact that Carvajal was pegging back the wide attacking player, and then Valverde was dragging the center back narrow, as he was often in that pocket of space between the central midfielder and the wide player, or simply occupying the center back and the left back. If you analyze the opening hour, it was often Modric in that space ahead of the front two in his own half, dictating the tempo of the game, playing penetrative passes between the midfield bank, as he often had the time and space to pick out runners and pick out his teammates that were floating into that space between the lines. That, combined with Bellingham making free runs from that midfield zone that weren't tracked in behind the Osasuna backline, led to a recipe for disaster. That was due to the fact that the Osasuna midfield bank was often passing off Bellingham's runs towards the center back, and while the midfielders weren't tracking the runs of Bellingham into the final third, nor were the Osasuna defenders. The only other variation that we witnessed down that right-hand side was when Modric pushed higher to occupy the space between the center back and the fullback, and that would see Valverde in a deeper right-sided position in the half space, and Carvajal still had the license to push forward down the right touchline zone. To no surprise, Modric was involved in Madrid's winner, but it stemmed with Valverde in that deeper inside right position, and Modric had time time to pick out the run of Carvajal breaking between the left back and the center back, but focus on Bellingham prepared to make his movement in towards the penalty area. Modric plays the pass between the two Osasuna defenders, and he finds Carvajal in the Osasuna penalty area, and now you see Bellingham's run is not being picked up by the midfield bank. Carvajal identifies that run and instantly plays a first-time pass in towards Bellingham, and with Carvajal taking two Osasuna players out of the game, that's where you end up seeing Bellingham receiving the ball freely in the penalty area and having enough time to place it on towards his left foot, where he fired an effort from point-blank range beyond the keeper. Ultimately, at the start of the second half, we witnessed more of Valverde in that deeper inside right position, with Modric pushing into that space between the lines just ahead of the center back and the left back, and at times combining with Carvajal down that right side zone. And on the left-hand side, we initially did see Mendy in that pocket of space with Bellingham in a deeper position and Vini Jr. hugging the touchline. But as the game persisted, you start to see Vini Jr. looking to attempt to receive the ball in that pocket of space from Modric specifically, and from there he was looking to receive the ball and break forward and towards the Madrid penalty area. However, again, when you analyze Madrid's second goal, it stems with great individual skill from Bellingham to bypass Osasuna pressure and carry the ball towards the final third, and from here he takes two defenders with him. He ends up splitting them and finding Valverde at the edge of the box, and focus on Bellingham's movement. No one tracks his run, everyone's focused on Valverde, who has the ball, and he's able to play the ball around three Osasuna defenders for Bellingham, whose run wasn't tracked in towards the penalty area once again from either the midfield bank or the defensive bank. And from there, as he receives the ball in the penalty area with his right foot, he's able to place his effort beyond the keeper. And then the other subtle tweak that we witnessed from Ancelotti in that second half that helped kill off the game was the positioning of Vini Jr. In the second half, Osasuna was warned with his positioning in between the fullback and the center back, as he was looking to break in beyond them to get in behind to get into goal scoring positions. And when you look at the two final goals that Madrid score, it stems with Valverde leading the transition and sliding the ball between those two players for Vini Jr. to break free on goal. That 4v2 witnessed Tchouaméni now having a bit more time on the ball, and from here you witness situations where you look to pick out Bellingham making runs from those pockets of space in behind the Osasuna backline, and Osasuna were equally warned when Tchouaméni had time and space to play a long ball over the top for Vini Jr. making a run between the right center back and the right back. And then in the build up to the fourth goal, they're punished once again, and it stems with Tchouaméni playing that long ball over the high line and it's Vini Jr. making the run between the fullback and the center back. And from there, what you end up witnessing is that Vini Jr. does a very good job of bringing the ball down and holding off the center back as Bellingham is looking to push forward. And by doing this and using his strength with his back to goal, he gives the striker enough time to make a run in towards the penalty area. The two center backs don't close him down, and that allows Vini Jr. to slide the ball between both to create a legitimate goal scoring position, and ultimately that resulted in Madrid's fourth goal. So as you could see, this was a comfortable win for Real Madrid, focused on exploiting space down the right hand side in the first half, whilst utilizing the vertical movement of Bellingham and Vini Jr. to bypass Osasuna's defensive line.